Hello and welcome to Saurav's classes. We move to the decision making section in the XAT paper. Now, as we all know that this section deals with business decisions. So before we get into that, let us understand the basics of business and how business decisions are taken, what are the trigger points, what are the decision criteria. Let us try and understand the basics. So any business is about a product or a service which is sold and bought. Who sells it? It is sold by the producer or manufacturer. Producer. And who buys it? It is the customer. And there is an exchange happening. Someone is selling it, someone is buying it. And that exchange is in terms of money, which is price. And this price is the price that the customer is willing to pay for the product. And what does that mean? That means that at every point in time, the customer values a particular product differently. For example, let's take the case of cell phones. When cell phones came into the market in the late 1990s, early 2000, there were very few players. Nokia was the dominant player at that time. Siemens had some few cell phones at that time and a few others. But the dominant player in the market was Nokia. And the prices of their basic cell phones were around 6,000, 7,000 rupees at that point in time. And there were few customers who were willing to pay for that kind of price. But there were not many customers, not many players in the market. So what happened was, over a period of time, other players came in, other producers started producing cell phones of the same variety, and therefore there was competition. And due to that competition, the prices came down. The customers had choices. They were not willing to pay as much a price as they were willing to pay earlier on. So this is what we call as the product life cycle. So price is customers' willingness to pay. This is price. And if you look at the product life cycle of any product, when the product is introduced, the price is typically very high. And over a period of time, the prices started coming down and it stabilizes in a point or around a point. Now, why does it happen? Because initially, as I told you, there are very few players, 1 to 2 players or very few players in the market and few customers who want to buy that product, and they want to buy it at a high price because there is no other product of that kind which would fulfill their needs. And then over a period of time, more players come in, there is competition, and therefore there are more choices for the customer, and the market dictates the price. So customers are not willing to pay that much, and slowly the prices start coming down. So this is price and this is time. So over a period of time, prices come down, as we have seen with cell phones and any other products, and then they stabilize at some point. So this is the concept of price. And then for the producer, he has to incur a cost to make the product or service. And this cost includes the cost of raw materials, the cost of labor, the cost of resources, infrastructure, and all of that. So there is a total cost which is involved in making this, in making any product for that matter. And the aim of any business is to make a profit. You want to make money when you do a business. So profit is nothing but the revenue minus the cost. So profit is revenue minus cost, and this revenue comes from the customer. It is the price per unit of the product multiplied by the number of units sold. And the cost is made up of two components. One is the fixed cost, which includes cost of infrastructure like rent, then the cost of permanent employees or labor, etc. These are fixed costs, and there is a variable component which is the cost associated with the product, the cost of raw material into number of units made, for example, varies with the number of units. So there is a cost which is fixed and is incurred regardless of whether you are producing the product or not, and then there is a variable cost which is associated with the product. So therefore, the first thing that we have to look for when we are talking about business is the customer, because without the customer there is no business. So number one is customer, and the customer buying the product means that there is a demand, there is a need. So customer is associated with demand, customer is associated with price, and then comes the cost which is incurred to make the product. Now, when we are talking about customer, we also have to understand two things. One is whether you know the customer, and second is whether the customer knows you. Now, if you are in a market selling a product, then definitely the customer knows you because they are buying your product. But if you are just entering a market, for example, with a product, the customer doesn't know you. But you might know the customer. You might have the data from surveys or data from the internet, data from your competitors who are already in that market, those kind of information. So you might know the customer in various ways, but the customer is yet to know you unless and until you start selling your product or service. So these are the fundamental decision points of any business that will be started or will venture into a new market or new region. Okay, so now let's see what this particular case tells us. So it talks about two towns which are located 15 kilometers apart. One of them is called Jayanagar, the other one is called Ramnagar, and we are told that there are 4 bakeries in Jayanagar, of which one is owned by a guy called Jagdeep Singh, and the name of that is La Bagweth. And this particular bakery serves bread and cakes, and it serves cakes of 2 varieties, with egg and eggless. And we are also told that there is a competitor of La Bagweth called La Croissant who sells only cakes and breads, but cakes only of the egg with egg variety, not the eggless type. And we are told that La Croissant has a 40% market share in Jamnagar, whereas La Bagweth, which is Jagdeep's company, has 30% market share. This is the information that is provided. Now we are asked that Jagdeep wants to open a branch in Ramnagar, which is the other town. And which of the following facts about Ramnagar will best support his decision? Now again, let us recap what we understood, that his decision should first be based on the customer, information of the customer. That means whether there are customers willing to buy that product, whether he knows those customers and the customers know him, and then you will have to think of the price that the customer is willing to pay for those products, and finally the cost, because the cost is important to decide his profitability. So the first will be customer. So let's see the options. Option A says 3% of La Bagweth's current revenue comes from Ramnagar. So which means that La Bagweth is already in Ramnagar. It is already selling products there. So therefore, they know the customer knows them, there is a demand, there is a price which the customer is paying, there is a cost which he is incurring and making profit from there. So all of this is or can be inferred from the information that is given in the first option. So this is a very strong decision point for him to decide to open another branch in Ramnagar. The second one says, before starting his own bakery, Jagdeep was supplying bread to most bakeries in Ramnagar. Now, which means that he knows the customer. There is a demand, there is a price that the customers were paying, and the cost was managed by both the bakery that was selling it as well as Jagdeep himself who was making the products. But the problem in this case is that the customers didn't know him. They didn't know him. They only knew that the bakery that was selling his products had those products. So they knew the bakery that was actually selling them, not Jagdeep. So this is not as strong a decision point as A. A is stronger than B. Next we come to C, which says La Croissant, which is Jagdeep's competitor in Jayanagar, Ramnagar branch struggles with a market share of 10%. Now, whether La Croissant is operating in Ramnagar or not has nothing to do with Jagdeep's decision, because it is La Croissant which is making a profit and having a market share. That means customers know La Croissant, not Jagdeep, and Jagdeep might know the customer, fine, that is okay. He knows that there is a demand. He knows that the customers are paying a price. The cost is managed by La Croissant, so he doesn't know whether how much it will cost and whether that will be profitable or not. So that is a question mark. And most importantly, the customer doesn't know him. So this is not as strong a decision point as number one again. Jagdeep has managed to acquire a big space in Ramnagar at a nominal rent. Now this is not talking about the customer at all. We can't make out whether there is a demand there, whether this kind of products are being purchased by the customers out there, what kind of revenue they're making, any of that. So getting something at a nominal rent means that will have an impact on the cost, but the cost comes much later. So there is no information about demand, so this is not the most appropriate one. Number E says Ramnagar is served by 4 bakeries and the 2 largest ones have market shares of 55 and 25%. Now this again doesn't talk anything about whether the customer knows Jagdeep's company. Yes, it says that there is a demand. It says that customers are buying these kind of products, they are paying a price. The cost obviously is managed by the companies that are selling them. So we don't know whether Jagdeep would be able to manage that cost. So that is a question mark. And most importantly, the customers doesn't know Jagdeep, which is very clear from the first statement that yes, he is operating in that market, therefore customers know him. So therefore, option E is not relevant for his decision point. He will go with the first option, which is option A, which clearly says that he's operating there, so customers know him, he knows the customer, there is demand, there is price which is being paid by the customer, and there is a cost which he's incurring and able to manage profits. So option A is the best option here. Going to number 2. Now this one says that he wants to open a 100% eggless branch in Ramnagar. And he has collected some information around this. The first one says Eggless products account for 30% of Jagdeep's sales. Now what does this tell us? This tells us that there is a demand for eggless products, but it is not telling whether Ramnagar falls in this space. It is not talking about Ramnagar. This demand can be from Jayanagar only. So we don't know from where this demand is coming. And it also says that he is making a revenue out of it. So therefore there is a price that customers are paying for it. But again, the question is, it is not telling us anything about whether it is Ramnagar or not. Next, we go to the next one, which says at least 20% of all bakery sales in Ramnagar is from eggless products. Now, this is very clearly telling us that in Ramnagar, there is a strong demand or a good demand, I would say, for eggless products. So demand is there. So therefore customers are there. So this is a very strong argument in favor of starting a Eggless branch in Ramnagar, because there is a strong demand there. The third one says the eggless varieties of La Baguette contains minute traces of egg. Now this doesn't tell anything about the demand, it doesn't tell anything about the customer, and the customers doesn't know what is contained in the eggless variety. They will go with it at face value. So this is of no significance as far as the decision for opening a eggless branch in Ramnagar is concerned, because it doesn't talk about the customer at all. Number 4 says La Baguette currently makes 3% of its revenue from Ramnagar, and all of it comes from eggless products. Now this is very clear that Jagdeep has a presence in Ramnagar, so therefore customers know him, he knows the customer, there is a price, there is a cost, all of that is getting covered. So the same argument comes in as we saw in the first option in the earlier question, that all of that is getting covered here. So this one is a very strong argument in favor of taking a decision of opening an eggless branch in Ramnagar. So 4 is a strong argument, 2 is a strong argument, 1 is kind of giving us some fact about the demand overall around the eggless products. So 2, 4 and 1 probably are in. 3 is definitely out. 5 says La Croissant's Ramnagar branch struggles with a market share of 10%. Now La Croissant is Jagdeep's competitor. Now competitor's information doesn't tell me anything, and it is not telling anything about the demand for eggless product, because La Croissant doesn't sell eggless products. So whether it has a 10% market share or not only tells us that there is a demand for egg with egg variety. It doesn't talk anything about the demand for eggless products. So therefore this is irrelevant. We are looking for the demand for eggless products. So 2, 4 and 1 are the only ones that we can see are possible decision points. Now you see that option A contains 2, 4 and 1, and all the other options contains at least one of 5 or 3. Now we can clearly see that 5 and 3 are out. So all these 4 options are out. So option A is the only option that has the 3 decision points that we gathered. And it says the first or most important criteria, because it is talking about a descending order. So most important criteria is number 2, which says that there is a strong demand for eggless products in Ramnagar, is the most important decision criteria. And then the fact that Jagdeep's company has the expertise of making and selling those products in Ramnagar. So which means he has a presence in Ramnagar, therefore customers know him, he knows the customer, all of that comes in. So number 4 comes next. And the fact that there is a demand for eggless products, which is very clearly evident from number 1, is a third decision point. So 2, 4 and 1 are the decision points around which he would base his decision, and the order would be 2, 4 and 1. Moving to number 3, this says that Jagdeep has understood that in US there are bakeries who sell ready to bake products. Ready to bake products means ones which are semi prepared, and you get many of these varieties in today's supermarkets, ready to make rotis and ready to make kadai chawal and things like that. So what you do is you buy those products and put it in the micro oven with water, and it's ready in a few minutes. So these are ready to bake products, ready to micro oven products, I would say. And if it's a baked product like bread or cake, then it's ready to bake. It is just ready to be baked in an oven. So these are the products which are very common in US market now, and he wants to introduce these kind of products in the Indian market. Now he also has gathered some facts, and based on that or based on those facts, he has to take a decision. Now, what are these facts? The first one says US bakeries that also sell ready to bake products earned higher revenues compared to those that did not. But this is talking about the US market. This is not talking about the Indian market, which can be drastically different. As we all know, Indian consumers behave differently from US consumers. So this is not talking about the Indian market. So this is definitely not a very good decision point for him. Number two says around 7% of Jagdeep's regular customers own baking machines or baking ovens. That means they can possibly go for ready to bake products. So it is giving the information that they have the infrastructure to go for ready to bake products. And it is also telling us that since they have baking ovens, so they definitely consume some kind of ready to bake products. So there is a demand within the customer base that he has. So this is a very strong argument for him to go for this kind of products. The third one says the sale of baking ovens in India is forecasted to increase by 12% every year for the next 3 years. That means the demand for these kind of products will increase overall in India, and the assumption is that his customer base will also follow the same trend. So therefore the demand for ready to bake products within his customer base will also increase in proportion. So this is the assumption here, and this can also be a part of his decision point, but not as powerful as number 2, which is talking about his own customers. So 3 would fit in, but definitely not before 2. It will come after 2. Number 4 says 50% of Jagdeep's regular customers are full-time working couples. Now, being full-time working couples doesn't tell us anything whether they consume ready-to-bake products or they have baking ovens. They might eat outside, they might keep a cook, anything of that kind. So we don't know about their consumption pattern or demand. We don't know about their exact nature of demand. So this is not at all relevant. Unless and until I know what kind of food they consume, we cannot tell anything about these people. Number 5 says in Indian metros, ready to bake products give higher profit margins compared to finished products. Now this is talking about Indian market, and this is talking about higher profits for ready to bake products. So definitely this is going to come in as a decision point for Jagdeep. Now let's see the options. Now we see that in the options 1 and 4 will come last because these are the two most irrelevant points, 4 being the most irrelevant one. So we see in option B, C and E, option 4 is the last option. So clearly A and D are ruled out. So now we see option 1 will be one of the last options. So in option E, 1 and 4 are the last two options, and this seems the most logical choice. Now we look at B, where they are putting 1 as the first or most important criteria in descending order. So information about the US market cannot be the most important criteria for decision in Indian market. So this is ruled out. Option C and option E both gives 2 as the first choice, so which is correct because it is directly talking about Jagdeep's customer base and the demand of ready to bake products within that customer base. So 2 will be the first choice. The second option is 5 in C and 3 in E. Now look at 3. The sale of baking ovens is expected to increase, so demand is expected to increase, and it is assumed that Jagdeep's customer base will follow the same trend. So therefore it clearly says that definitely there is going to be increased demand. So number 3 scores over number 5 or is more relevant than number 5, because number 5 talks about the demand in Indian metros in general. It is not talking about the demand increasing or decreasing. Number 5 is talking about profitability, I'm sorry, not demand. So it is talking about ready to bake products being more profitable. So being more profitable means that it gives higher profit, which means revenue minus cost. Now, profit can come by increasing revenue and decreasing cost, or both of them. So we don't know the exact nature of how these profits are generated, and this is, a very generic statement. So it is not talking about the demand at all. So it is not talking about the customer, but option number 3 talks about the demand which is expected to increase, and it is directly linked to the customers or consumers. So option 3 should be the second criteria, which is visible in the fifth option given here. So 2, 3 is correct. Then 5, that is correct, because then it is talking about the profitability of these kind of products, correct. And 1 and 4 are the last two options, which are absolutely irrelevant, as we have seen. So option E is the correct choice.